The OSG app is up and running on your Android or iPhone. Install the OSG app and listen to our podcast from college football, soccer, and lacrosse. What are you waiting for? Download the OSG app today.
I told my team this, and I want everybody to understand this, okay? A lot of people want this job, so they think, but I'm the man that's built for this job.
They'll let you know.
You're listening to The Review on the OSG Podcasting Network.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Review. This is the OSG Sports team. We are talking college football. The weekend that was, a lot of things happening, some strange things happening, some things that I don't think anybody really would have predicted to start the season, but yet they happened. All that and more coming up on this episode here on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network. I am OSG Phil. He is OSG Nelson. And we're about to kind of break down some of the bigger and more noteworthy things, games, issues, and otherwise that happened over the course of the weekend. We'll start in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where the Alabama Crimson Tide beat Tennessee in a game that was a little bit tighter and more physical and I guess a little closer than most people expected. Alabama won, but the game was not without some storylines, probably the biggest of those being the injury to star quarterback Tua Tagovailoa.
Yeah, Tua left the game in the second quarter, did not return. They're saying, depending on who you read and what you listen to, he's had surgery on the ankle. It was a high ankle sprain. He's out for a couple of weeks. So it should be interesting to see what's going to happen in Tuscaloosa. And I think that probably just the unfamiliarity of a backup quarterback with a first-string offense. Not a lot of time that the twos get snaps with the first team. So, yeah, it was a lot closer. Tennessee covered. And Nick Saban said that Tua was going to be out for a couple of weeks. I don't think that really derails anything. I think that what that does, though, is probably for anybody who is a juice box purveyor, you might want to go the other team covering over the next couple of games.
Well, the next couple of games means they square off with Arkansas next week.
Or not.
A good practice game, a good opportunity for the Mac attack to get up and running. By Mac, I'm talking about, what the heck is his name?
Jack Mack and the heart attack?
No, the backup quarterback for Mac Jones. Duh.
Okay.
Mac Jones, the backup quarterback for Alabama, got some play time, got some good repetitions. Arkansas will be some good, even better practice for him should the need arise. But after they play Arkansas next week, they have a bye before they square off with LSU, which essentially buys 2.5, 3 weeks for Tua to kind of get his feet back underneath him.
Pun not intended?
Not intended.
Not intentionally intended, but listed as a high ankle sprain. He's had surgery on it, and so all that was probably just to check the muscles and make sure that everything's there, that there wasn't any other kind of interior damage. So according to Alex Scarborough from our friends at the Four Letter, so he's undergoing surgery, and Nick Saban, in a statement, referred to it as a tightrope procedure on the right ankle. Same injury, opposite ankle Tua injured last year. Tua will miss next week's game against Arkansas, but we expect a full and speedy recovery. So, everything points to LSU for a return.
Some interesting takeaways from this game, however. Tennessee could have made it a challenge for the Crimson Tide late in the game. Jarrett Guarantano found himself back under center for the Volunteers after freshman QB Brian Maurer left his second straight game with another concussion, his second concussion.
Yeah.
And Guarantano had a chance with the game at 28-13, at least got it within a touchdown. Tennessee was driving, got the ball down to the Alabama goal line. And on 4th and 1, it's not really clear if Guarantano ran the play that was called or audibled out of a play, but he tried to sneak it by jumping over the top of the pile.
Yeah.
Somebody hit him in the hands, knocked the ball loose. Trayvon Diggs recovered the ball, goes 100 yards, touchdown, 35-13, game over. Yeah. And Tennessee coach Jeremy Pruitt, his head may have exploded.
Yeah. He had his Scanners moment, no question.
And the talker from that is Pruitt's head was so bright beet red that he did what's now considered a no-no in football.
Yeah.
Like grabbing Guarantano by the face mask, at least briefly, until I think it looks like he realized what he did and immediately pulled back. But by then it's too late.
Yeah. And Jeremy Pruitt has caught the commensurate amount of hell for that. And I mean, in this day and age, I mean, I know that if you're of a certain vintage and a certain age, you understand that the certain coaches are certain ways. They do get emotional, they do get heated, and they will do things to try to get your attention, to emphasize the fact that they are in fact trying to get your attention. And that includes coming through the face mask and the face guard and grabbing either under or overhanded. And it was about a 2-second grab. Pruitt realized what he was doing, and then he pulled back. So he's going to be catching hell for quite some time, and I'm sure that there's probably going to be a public apology coming up in the next couple days.
But we digress.
Yeah. These days, yeah, I get it. I know. You just don't do that kind of stuff anymore.
Yeah, it's more or less verboten to put your hands on a player, whether you're happy with them, it doesn't matter. You don't do it.
Just if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. That's all. Attaboy.
Moving on, we'll go and talk about what was probably nothing. It was the biggest upset of the day.
They'll let you know.
And that's the Illinois Fighting Illini with a game-winning 39-yard field goal by James McCourt. Illinois beats now previously number 6 Wisconsin 24-23 in Champaign. Champagne corks popping everywhere. Illinois had done pretty much nothing all season. Wisconsin was the great big bear of the North. And Lovie Smith gets himself a signature win.
He does. And, you know, to hear the play-by-play call at the end, when you know it's a long season and you have a moment like this and you've got your play-by-play guy and an offensive lineman as your color guy, you know it was a fun call. And for those that have seen it on social media, whether it was posted by the Illini themselves or the Football Network, it was fun to see the reactions, the long version in the booth, and the call on the field as time expired.
And to me, it's amazing that somehow the Illini ended up winning. Wisconsin had the ball for 40 minutes in the game. They dominated in almost every statistical category, but yet they lost the game.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of it you can attribute to sitting there and saying, yeah, they were looking ahead, blah, blah, blah. But honestly, when you have a team that if you're the underdog, you're undermanned, you're under everything, you're under in this game. And it was, I think Illinois was a 33.5 point dog. What exactly? And I'm sure that Rosie would be more than happy to supply a drop in that case. But in these situations, yardage, time of possession do not matter. You can give up all the yards in the first 80 yards of the field that you want, but as long as you close ranks in the red zone and you take advantage of the opportunities that are there for you to make sure that the other guy doesn't score any points, to me, these days, those are the two categories to me that mean the least, considering how offenses are these days. with a Wisconsin team that has a bunch of big uglies and they want to move the pile, they want to move the ball, they want to move the pile 10 feet at a time. They're cool with that. If you're Illinois, I just sit there and say, yeah, let them. We'll stand up. We'll be a stone wall for the last 20 yards. You can do whatever you want in the first 80, and we'll just be ready for you. So great coaching job. And at the same time, what Wisconsin's loss does, I think, is it hurts Ohio State when it comes to the Final Four. And you can tell that the folks are kind of sitting there in Columbus, sitting there going, dog, you couldn't have done anything for us there. But I think it's a big loss that impacts more than one team in the Big 10, 12, 14.
It's not something that I didn't think would happen to Wisconsin at some point this season. They're pretty much good for a game like this every year.
Right.
I've talked about this endlessly in the Dirty Dozen and Bottom of the Barrel column.
Oh, that reminds me. Does this mean that Wisconsin goes into the bottom of the barrel now for losing to Illinois?
Maybe. You'll have to tune in on Wednesday to find out.
Early tease. Just thought I'd ask.
Dirty Dozen and Bottom of the Barrel podcast drops right here on all of your OSG Sports Podcasting Network affiliates.
Attaboy.
Or on theonlinesportsguys.com.
Or on the app.
Or on the app, OSG Sports. It's not something that Wisconsin hasn't done before. They seem to always manage to lose one Big Ten game they shouldn't lose.
Yeah.
This one would be it.
This is it.
Yeah, I think in the big picture, maybe it will dent Ohio State a little bit. It'll ding Ohio State maybe a little bit, but at the end of the day, I still think Ohio State's the best team right now in college football.
Okay.
And I haven't seen anything to indicate otherwise. I think they probably will run right by Wisconsin because Wisconsin's Achilles heel has and probably always will be lack of team speed.
Right.
They've never been able to keep up with any of the SEC schools or the faster schools around, which is, again, why this didn't come as a surprise to me.
Yeah.
But we'll see how it plays out. Wisconsin and Illinois play in a couple of weeks. It should be one heck of a game. And speaking of Big Ten football, another team that might be sitting a little prettier now after what happened to Wisconsin, and that's the Penn State Nittany Lions, who are also 7-0.
Yeah.
And coming off a nice win over the Michigan Harbaughs, who continue their struggles.
Well, and I think once again, we will emphasize this point pretty much every week that I think that Coach Kaki's time in Ann Arbor is coming to a close. And I was getting into this discussion on another one of our partner programs with our friends up at Barn Burner, and they wanted to know about Harbaugh and if he was heading straight back to the NFL. I said he probably takes a year off and continues to earn a paycheck doing punditry or something like that, and then he might put himself back in the hopper somewhere. But do you want to hire someone like Jim Harbaugh in the NFL, considering what we've seen this past season and true at the University of Michigan? I figured that Michigan would cover. I thought that the margin was pretty big when you looked at what everyone in those betting places was thinking. I still thought that Penn State was going to get the win. Penn State, yeah, I mean, it's going to come down probably to Penn State and Ohio State trying to figure out which one of those two teams gets in from the conference to be added to Oklahoma for the mix for a Final Four right now.
Yeah, and just a brief little aside about Big Ten football, the other undefeated team in that conference, the Minnesota Golden Gophers, ladies and gentlemen, 7-0.
Yeah.
I don't know that they're going to necessarily upset the apple cart, but boy, wouldn't it be fun if they did.
Yeah, and they were responsible for one of the great moments of the weekend when you have a cancer fighter and survivor go out there and do some stuff for you on special teams. That was definitely the moment of the weekend for Minnesota. But Minnesota coming out of lane 8 right now at 7-0.
Yeah, we'll move on here to another conference trying hopefully to have a team that makes it to the college football playoff, or at the very least the Pick Six. That's the Pac-12, where the conference leading Oregon, I almost called them Oregon Ducks managed to rally back and beat the Washington Huskies in Seattle 35-31 in a pretty darn exciting game. Fun to watch.
Yeah, it was. And I figured it was going to be within that 3-point margin. I honestly thought that Washington was going to cover, because when you see a 3, that to me means a push. And to me, I always end up heading to the home side. Justin Herbert, I still will maintain, made the mistake of coming back this season instead of declaring for the NFL draft and staying out last season, at the end of last season. But, with Oregon and what you're seeing, I think he stayed a year too long. He's an okay quarterback, but obviously combines and workouts will determine his value. I just think that Oregon probably hiccuped coming out of the blocks, and now that they've beaten Washington, everything's all square in the North.
Yeah, I think they've gradually improved over every week. And I think the thing that you've got to take into consideration for Oregon is for all these years, we've talked about how flashy they've been on offense and how many points they could rack up. What really their calling card's been so far this season is defense.
Yeah. Well, when you got a guy like Mario Cristobal, who's your head coach, and he has that Miami mentality, and he's brought it to Oregon, you're seeing the old school Miami stuff, the South Florida stuff, the athletes doing things well on defense, dialing things back a little offensively, making it a little bit more possession based. And while you do run spread, it's not NASCAR the entire time like it was, say, with Chip Kelly. But you're seeing an Oregon team that has more of an SEC, ACC kind of a flavor to it, and it's going to take a year or so for folks to catch up in the Pac-12 to figure out what they're seeing.
Staying out west, another game I want to talk about real briefly here is Boise State versus BYU. Boise State looking all the world like they were going to be your Group of 5 team of the year. They came into this matchup 6-0. However, they exited Utah at 6-1 after BYU gets a 28-25 win.
Nothing like trick plays coming from Kalani Sitake's playbook to, I think it was like a tight end jet sweep end around halfback option throwback kind of a thing. So Kalani Sitake goes to the back of the playbook up against a Boise team that traditionally does those kinds of things themselves. But that trick play seemed to kind of break things wide open for BYU. And so now you're looking at SMU at 19. You're looking at App State at 24. And I don't think that anybody is going to be making that kind of a run from 19 or 24. You might see SMU coming into the top 16 and doing something in one of the 8 bowl games that's close, but they might be tied in unless there's an out to a New Year's Day bowl. They don't be tied to what's going on in the American. So we'll see what happens with SMU, but right now Boise drops down, and you're looking at those two guys as Go 5 schools that are looking to beat the door down from the outside.
Yeah, speaking of SMU, the Mustangs squaring off with Temple in a game that I kind of thought would be somewhat closer than it was. The Mustangs just absolutely lit them up. Shane Buechele, 30 for 53, 457, and 6 touchdowns.
Why not? You find an offense that's good for you like Shane Buechele has. He's gotten out of the shadow of things in Austin, Texas, and you're seeing what he's been able to do there in the Metroplex. Good for SMU to be making the strides that they are, even though you did have a portaled quarterback to do it.
Yeah. And realistically, the schedule's favorable. The challenge game for them is probably going to be in a couple of weeks when they go to Memphis to play the Tigers.
Yep.
But I think you're looking at, if anybody's going to make a Group of 5 run, this is probably going to be it.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think it's going to be SMU. I think that App State's too far outside the margins right now, even if they were to run the table.
Staying kind of in the Southwest part of the world, another game that kind of jumped off the page at me more because because it ended up being a little bit more competitive than I expected it to be. And that's Texas struggling with Les Miles and the Kansas Jayhawks. Texas gets a 50-48 win on a Cameron Dicker 33-yard field goal. As time expired after the team scored 6 touchdowns in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, it was just line them up and I'm just going to run this play. I think that Tom Herman has got a lot to learn about his team defensively after this game, because the entire world, when Kansas scored to make it 47-46, everybody was on Twitter, and I was in my timeline, and I'm looking at it, and they're sitting there saying, okay, Hatter's got to go for 2. He's got to go for 2. Oh, he's going to do a fake field goal for a 2-point attempt, that kind of stuff. I mean, literally, that's what folks were saying. So what happens? They go for 2. It's 48-47. And honestly, just because Kansas's defense is just so porous right now, and it's going to take a couple of years to flush things out and cycle athletes through. Sam Ehlinger gets down the field. They set things up, and honestly, there was the way that fourth quarter was. There was too much time on the clock when Texas got the last possession. Kick the game-winning field goal from just inside 40, get the Duke. But I think that it's going to be interesting this week to see what the press conferences are in Austin and in Lawrence, because you know that Les Miles is going to sit there and talk about that loss as one that we're going to build off of and talk about the future and this and that. And Tom Herman should be pretty introspective about it, because there's a lot of problems that Kansas exposed Texas on.
One last game before we wrap things up here on the first block of the review here on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network. And that's an SEC game that surprised pretty much everybody. The Missouri Tigers went to Nashville to play Vanderbilt in a game that everybody clearly expected them to win, as Missouri had jumped up to number 22 in the rankings and briefly held the lead in the SEC East, only to have that lead thwarted when Vanderbilt walked away with their second win of the season. Riley Neal comes in as a replacement quarterback, throws a 21-yard TD to Cam Johnson with 8:57 left, and the Commodores make that hold up. They beat Missouri 21-14. Words really can't describe this one.
Nope. Keyshawn Vaughn was 29 for 96 on the ground for Vanderbilt. Had a touchdown. He also had a touchdown through the air, 4 catches for 80 yards. And I think that the post game that Derek Mason gave SEC Network about, and they were wondering, it's like, all right, we're going to wonder about Derek Mason and his job. And so Derek Mason was asked that question after the game, answered the critics, gave his standard 30-second fired up answer, and walked off.
Coach, you've answered questions about your job security all week long, and this team comes out and upsets a ranked Missouri team. What are you feeling right now?
Well, first of all, honor to God. It's been a rough patch, man, but I told my team this, and I want everybody to understand this, okay? A lot of people want this job, so they think, but I'm the man that's built for this job. Every day, man, we grind. We grind. Don't question us. Don't question who we are, what we do, or how we play. We're Vanderbilt men. Commodores, Akron, die!
And so Vandy right now at 2-5, 1-3 in the SEC. Missouri's the flip side. They're 5-2 and 2-1. But it's these kind of wins that will keep Derek Mason around as the head coach at Vandy, even if they do something like a 5-7.
Speaking of sticking around, we've got another block here to go on the review.
Oh, excellent tease. Nicely done.
Yes. Rolled right into that one. All those years of being a producer didn't go for naught. Mm-hmm. Coming up in the second block of the show, we're going to talk about a dance-off that got some players ejected, a new application of the overtime rule in college football.
Yeah.
We touched on it briefly a little bit earlier, and that's a great story out of Minnesota. All that more when we come back for the second half of the review. You are listening to the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
Acting! Brilliant! Thank you! Thank you!
The online sports guys would love to hear from you. Go to our Twitter page at OSG Sports for a comment, rant, or just whatever's on your mind about college football.
If you want to scale a mountain, buy boots. If you want to turn your crush into something more, say hi. At Country Financial, we know protecting the things you love and preparing for tomorrow start with simple steps. So we help you take small steps today with insurance and financial services that can have a big impact on your family's future.
For all your home, auto, and life insurance needs, call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871.
Soccer Down Here is sponsored by Apolinski & Associates, LLC, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience. Call Steve Apolinski at 518-350-4231 or email him at steve@aa-legal.com if you need help with a wrongful death or serious injury matter. Steve Apolinski is rated one of the top 100 trial attorneys in Georgia, recognized as Legal Elite by Georgia Trend magazine for being one of the most effective lawyers in Georgia.
A hype dance-off between the two teams. I didn't think I heard any smack talking, but these referees are giving penalties to every single player on each roster.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around. You're in the second half of the review. This is the OSG Sports team. We are talking college football, wrapping up a busy weekend where there were a lot of crazy games and some really crazy side stories that happened. Perhaps the weirdest of them happening at the Georgia Southern Coastal Carolina game. And I will qualify this by saying I am a Georgia Southern alumni. And I'm as mystified as anybody about what happened because nobody really knows. Between the third and the fourth quarters, the Eagles and Coastal Carolina teams both kind of came up off the sidelines a little bit, started dancing and jumping around to the song Mo Bamba.
Mo Bamba.
A hype dance-off between the two teams. I didn't think I heard any smack talking, but these referees are giving penalties to every single player on each roster, which means that we're going to see about 5 or 6 ejections.
Neither team was particularly close to the other. There was no, at least readily evident profanities or threats or any challenges going on. They were just trying to have some fun, getting themselves psyched up for the last quarter of what ended up being a 3 overtime game. Won, by the way, by Georgia Southern.
Yeah.
And the refs decided to insert themselves by throwing penalty flags and not just penalizing a couple of people. They penalized the entire roster for each team.
And it led to 7 ejections because of the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. 7 ejections. Greg Talbot, the voice of Georgia Southern on ESPN Plus, I give him a lot of credit for the Mo Bamba reference. And it was, they weren't going after each other. Maybe they went past the hash marks as they're not supposed to or something like that. I don't know what triggered it from the official's perspective. But nevertheless, it was one of the crazier moments of the weekend. And it was a great win, though, for Georgia Southern. And I'm going to go ahead and ask you, Phil. We know about the post-game celebrations that Chad Lunsford has in the locker room for Georgia Southern after wins. Did you see this one?
I did not see this one.
Traditionally, what Chad Lunsford does is he will drop the Eagles' elbow onto a chair in the locker room. And all the guys love it. And it's one of Chad's calling cards to what he does at Georgia Southern. This time out, and the video is posted on the Georgia Southern Twitter feed,
Yes, I will go find it and pull it and add it to the show.
Someone got a Ric Flair robe, put it on Lunsford in the locker room. He strutted and then dropped the Eagles' elbow.
Nice.
Amazing stuff. That's your required viewing if you're gonna just listen to the show and not watch us on our YouTube channel.
Yes, if you're watching the YouTube channel, there's a pretty good chance you're going to see it.
Yeah.
Couple other things that were of note this weekend. A little bit of an accident in Oklahoma. Possibly the only malfunction for the Sooners is they absolutely manhandle West Virginia 52-14 in a game where Jalen Hurts missed one pass the entire game. The highlight of the game, the thing that everybody probably will remember, however, is the Sooner schooner taking a turn too fast and wiping out in the middle of the field.
Yeah, everybody's okay.
Everybody's all right. Nobody hurt.
Everybody's all right. Yeah, no, the horses are fine. The Conestoga wagon just tipped over, took a tight turn. Everybody ended up falling out of it, but everybody's fine. And I'm shocked that they are, considering how nasty it looked if you saw the video. But it's just one of those things that when you have live animals and people, sometimes you've seen Bevo run amok occasionally. You saw, was it Bevo and Uga went at it one year indoors, and you have these kinds of things. But no, everybody's okay from the Sooner Schooner tip over. But yeah, it was wild video when that came across.
Yeah, another interesting little note here. We hadn't really addressed it during the offseason, but the NCAA made a couple of adjustments to the overtime rules because a slew of games that went 6 and 7. I think there was a game last year that went 8 overtimes.
LSU.
Yeah. They've changed the rules now after I think it's the 4th overtime. Both teams have to play for 2-point conversions.
After the 3rd. I think it's the 3rd.
No, after the 4th.
Okay.
Starting in the 5th, because starting in the 5th overtime, the Virginia Tech North Carolina game, a game that went 6 overtimes and ended up with a Virginia Tech 43-41 win. Both teams missed their 2-point conversion in the 5th overtime.
Yeah.
And finally, after 4+ hours,
oh God,
Virginia Tech got their 2-point conversion. They got the win. Everybody was happy. There was much rejoicing.
Yay.
In Blacksburg. Interesting rule, though. Didn't know they had that.
Well, the reason I initially thought it was the 3rd is because with the games that I do on Friday nights, it is after the 3rd overtime. You do have to go for 2. So same premise, and that's what I'm used to seeing. But it really just, you sit there and you're wondering, maybe you just need a Mo Bamba dance-off or something in the 4th overtime to decide things so games don't go 6, 7, 8 overtimes like the LSU game did last year. But it does test your mettle. It does test your game planning. It does test your defense. It tests your constitution. But yeah, wildest game in the history of the ACC, and I think it was one of the longest ones too.
It was only 43-41.
I know.
Speaking of wild finishes, a couple of interesting quotes from South Carolina head coach Professor Muschamp after the Gamecocks lost to Florida 38-27 at Williams-Brice Stadium. Muschamp was a little less than happy about more than a couple of interesting refereeing calls. Perhaps the one that got under his skin the most was an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty he got late in the game where the official, after arguing with the official proceeded to run to the other end of the field and then threw the flag.
40 yards away. And you know that Will Muschamp is mad these days when he takes the bookkeeper eyeglasses that he wears. He had them up here. He had them across his eyes. He brought them all the way down to the point of his nose and then started talking. That's how mad he was. He didn't just have them, like he was reading. He tipped them all the way down to the tip of his nose, then started ranting. That's how mad he was.
I think it was the fury in his head that just knocked him down there.
he was
oozing
pissed.
Out, relocating his glasses because he was so wound up.
He was pissed.
I believe the proper terminology would be gutless. Going to be interesting to see what kind of fine he's going to get for that one, because he will get one.
Oh, yes.
The league office will not let that one slide.
No.
And he had an argument.
He did. When you're the official and you go 40 yards away and then throw your unsportsmanlike conduct PF flag instead of doing it to the guy's face, that's a bit much for me.
And he lost it after a pretty obvious offensive pass interference call when one of his defensive backs got hit behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
Effectively knocking him out of the play and leading to a Florida Gator touchdown catch. Would it have changed the game? Maybe, maybe not.
But it's the premise of the thing, I think.
But exactly. It's the premise of the whole thing. And we'll finish this show with a great story. And really the thing that makes you reminds you how sports can be inspirational. Sports can uplift if you find the right story. And that's the story of Minnesota walk-on kick holder Casey O'Brien.
Yeah.
Casey got to not only go on the field once, he got to go up on the field a couple times. And if you don't know about Casey O'Brien, Casey's a 4-time cancer survivor.
Here's his hold for Lance. Laces out. Extra point good. That's what college football is all about.
Certainly. A 13-minute speech at the Big Ten luncheon in July. And what an awesome moment. 14 surgeries, months of chemotherapy, a metal rod in his left knee. He announced during that speech, by the way, that he has been cancer-free for 1 year.
Who still wanted to play college football and still wanted to actually be able to be out there. And he's gone through 14 surgeries and chemotherapy, had never gotten a chance to play. He finally got a chance.
Yep. And it can be something as simple as holding an extra point. And to see what Casey got to do when it was 28-0 in the fourth quarter, great move. And then he goes over and he and PJ Fleck share a hug on the sidelines. Really cool moment. But, it reminds you about what sports can be sometimes. And in this case, we're talking college football, but across the board, you can find out sometimes what college football is, since that's what this show is. But good on Minnesota, good on Casey O'Brien. Perfect hold through the uprights, made it 28-0. Good on you. Keep fighting and be an example for others.
Exactly. And I think with that, we'll go ahead and wrap things up here on this week's review. But before we do that, let's take a brief look at next week's schedule, because there'll be plenty to talk about.
Yes.
As we kind of gear up towards the rivalry season, the part of the year where the teams play the more intense games.
Yeah.
A couple of featured games that jump off the page this week. We mentioned Wisconsin and Ohio State, which is a noon kickoff in Columbus, Ohio. But the other game that's probably going to get most people's attention, and that's Auburn traveling to Baton Rouge to play the LSU Bayou Bengals.
Yep. Last week, Auburn knocked off Arkansas 51-10 in what was one of the worst attempts at a fake punt that we've ever seen in recent memory. One of the worst pop passes you could have ever thought of. And I'm sure that Chad Morris pretty much.
The Arkansas State player faking like he passed out.
Yeah. But you have that moment for Chad Morris in Arkansas. Auburn went ahead and won 51-10. And as pretty much expected, Gus Malzahn did not really show a whole lot. He kept it very vanilla. When Arkansas was keeping the game tighter than he wanted, that's when they just decided to run power football and get everybody squared away and make sure that they got the points that they needed. Bo Nix had a decent day. Running backs were decent. Running backs by committee. I think 7 different runners had stats by the end of the day. So Auburn didn't show a whole lot to LSU, and I think that the larger question for Auburn is the health of Boobie Whitlow going into the LSU game. Are they going to have him? Is he going to dress? Is he going to travel? And that's the larger question, I think, for Auburn leading into this game. And it's going to be a big test for Joe Burrow going up against the Auburn front 7. I think that when you're LSU and you try to figure out where Noah Igbenogany is on the field, that's your matchup when it comes to the passing game. But it's going to be a big test for Kevin Steele and that front 7, who's going to have to get pressure with 4 and probably drop 7. It's going to be a big test for the defensive line in LSU next weekend.
Looking forward to seeing that game. It's a 3:30 prime middle of the afternoon kickoff on CBS.
Yep.
And that's your big game of the week. John, I think we're going to wrap things up for reals this time.
Okay.
You want to do the promotional stuff and talk about the shows that are coming up for those who are interested in such things?
All right, let's see if I can remember them all. The onlinesportsguys.com for all the news that's fit to print. Usually it's a rant from you. We're adding content from Melissa Makos when it comes to health and fitness and her interviewing skills from her 20 years in the business. So a lot of that stuff's coming down the pike as well. Don't forget to like, friend, be a part of the conversation at OSG Sports on Facebook, on Twitter and on the YouTube channel. Don't forget to download the OSG Sports app, available iOS and Android for everything not soccer related. Everything soccer related goes to soccerdownhere.net and the Soccer Down Here app as well. And I'm trying to think of the other things that we have in the pipeline, the programming during the week. There's the OSG Sports app proven right there. There's the iPhone version. During the week, the Rivalries and Trophy Games show, EP'd by at Jay Wilkerson 16. AP_Goldman 85 is there. Corey McCartney is there. OSG Phil is there. OSG Nelson is there. It's fun to kind of peel the curtain back on some of the rivalries that go on there. He's got the midweek debrief as well. So you have those programs, all of our associations with our friends at Barn Burner up in Canada with their content that they help us out with, whether it's hockey or wrestling and things like that. So a lot of stuff on the OSG Sports app and stuff.
And with that, I will say thanks for sticking out through all that, everybody. You are listening to the review. We are the OSG Sports team, the online sports guys. For OSG Nelson, I am OSG Phil. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and we will talk to you again soon.
Enjoy all of our shows from the OSG Sports Podcasting Network. The OSG Sports app is up and running. Download it today.